Morning Cafe this lovely Friday. Mambo imeanza polepole lakini usijali hiyo momentum inakuja.
Most definitely. It's the last day of May.
Oh yes.
The May it end. Oh yes.
It's and also the very last day of a year I'm turning.
Oh yes. Happy birthday.
No, bado hajafika.
Ni kesho.
Ni kesho, sio leo.
Tuonani kesho.
Kesho kwanza nawapatia ruhusa muende stadium nyinyi wote. Mnasikia?
But tuonani kesho. So allow me to say happy birthday, Freddy.
Thank you.
Happy turnings to ni 60 morning.
Anyway, asante sana for joining us this lovely Friday morning. A lot to talk about, especially what's happening in South Africa.
Oh yes.
Julius Malema a few months ago asked many Kenyans when he commented about Kenya's elections, and he was a bit arrogant, a bit cocky, let me say, not really arrogant, a bit cocky, and displayed a lot of confidence. Now mambo inaenda mrama kule.
It is licking him.
He's not even among the top three parties. Yes, there's the ANC, there's the Democratic Alliance, the DA, which is coming second. Then there's another new party that has even overtaken the EFF. That's a Umkhonto Wesizwe. Yes, whose party leader is former President Jacob Zuma. Then EFF comes a distant fourth among other smaller parties. But we'll be discussing that and a lot more later on with my analysts. Do stand by for that.
Oh yes, and because it's a Friday, taking a look at tuangalie wacha tuanze na taifa leo.
Marafiki walinilipia. And you know that story about when you keep going to the bar every Friday and then your wife keeps asking you, wewe na una pesa? Hapana, my friends bought for me.
Marafiki ndio walinilipia.
Sio mimi. Hata mimi nilikuwa nimekataa wakati.
Though it raises a big question, how far can your friends go?
Aish.
How far can your friends really go for you?
But then again, what quality of friends do you have?
Yeah, true.
Yeah. Wewe kuna marafiki wanaweza kulipia ndege.
Akwambia usijali, shika itenem. Shika itenem.
Hata hiyo nipatie baadaye.
Kata nayo hiyo.
Ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo.
On the Standard, Ruto hustler jet talk flies into crosswinds. I love the wordplay with that one. Hustler jet flying into crosswinds.
Oh yes.
You get it?
All right, let's see what the other dailies have. On the People Daily, more tax burden as Treasury hits again. Okay. But then again, still mention of the hustler jet. Trip to US cost Kenyans only 10 million shillings. Do you believe that? By the way, do you? Okay, you'll tell us.
Sakaja versus Gachagua.
Oh yes, this is a big talking point. There's a lot happening in Nairobi today and other counties as the UDA constituency elections happen today.
Happen today, yes. And to another paper, I think turuke hiyo kwanza kidogo because hizo vitu za kina Among hustler jet the Dubai connection.
I tell you, ukiwa na marafiki wakubwa.
Na unauliza friends with benefits? My FWBs.
That's a very nice question to ask because they'll come for something.
Yeah, true.
Oh yes, it can't be for nothing.
Haikuangi pia na hiyo.
There's no free lunch. So if at all the discount was 190 million shillings, well, I don't know how much they'll come for.
Meaning
that's the biggest discussion in Nairobi this morning.
Can I take a look at so Business Daily is the final local paper.
Windfall for depositors as interest rates hit 24-year high. Banks are offering handsome returns to retain deposits. 10.32% on fixed deposit, the highest since 2000. If you have a million bob in a bank account somewhere, you'll earn at least 100,000 and some 300 shillings.
Wow, okay, interesting. Let's take a look at now other tuanze na
tungeanzia hapo tu. Yes, across the border in Tanzania, ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi, ukosefu wa ajira unavyozaa chawa, lakini hawazungumzii chawa ule mdudu. Wanasema kuna wasomi watumia mdahalo wa kigoda cha mwalimu kujadili ukubwa wa tatizo, wataja uduni wa elimu, ajira vimewafanya vijana kujipendekeza kupata fadhila na nafasi za uongozi. So vijana wamekuwa chawa. Sio ule mdudu, lakini ni kama chawa.
Kutegemea tu. Tuangalie other papers.
Let's cross over into Uganda for a while. Yeah?
Oh yes.
And there's still that word among, but this time around is not someone's name.
Oh yes. But I love how, because they will have used among here, but then they choose Anita, because it will have read hits among others. And the fact that they have from 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, this is the biggest conversation in Uganda. Why? So Speaker Anita Among received this particular ban in UK last month, and now USA. So they say the latest sanction, this sanction, means Uganda's third highest ranked public official is unwelcome to the US and to Britain, raise questions about how much longer she can remain effective and influential after being locked out of key international financing and travel systems.
You know, as Speaker, she oversaw the passing of that controversial anti-gay bill in Uganda. So you can actually tell where the pressure is coming from. But how many pages? 5, 6 pages of the coverage? Anyway, USA hits Anita among others. That's the front page of the Daily Monitor. In Uganda.
Let's take a look at, live still in...
yes.
We can finish up with Uganda before we get into matters Tanzania. And in Uganda, the Martyrs' Day celebrations, which is happening on Monday, is starting to the preparations for the same. So they say more pilgrims pour into Namugongo.
And I'm sure many Kenyans will be paying the pilgrimage as well in Namugongo.
Oh yes, they also have quite a coverage of the same. Martyrs choir finals for today.
Okay, all right, that's in Uganda. Back to Tanzania. And yes, on the Citizen, LNG, it's back to the negotiating table. The government and investors in the proposed liquefied natural gas project are set to go back to the negotiating table after the Attorney General raised queries on their draft agreement. And you realize that the front page of the Citizen is talking about mega infrastructure, whether transportation or manufacturing or now mining, natural gas. And this is what we've been looking at for a couple of months now in Tanzania. So the focus for Suluhu Hassan is mega infrastructure projects for Tanzania.
Road and really others.
Road, rail, they're talking about SGR, they're talking about huge natural gas mining. All right.
Oh, yes. Now let's get into some other matters, and can start off with the traffic, seeing how different roads are looking like this morning. 16 minutes past the top of the hour.
Yes, and the main problems are the usual ones. At the Muthaiga interchange and the Pangani interchange there, this Muthaiga, between Muthaiga and Pangani, this is the usual problem that we have every morning, but this time it is a bit more pronounced. You can see the red. It starts just after the, what do you call it, Mathare Mental Hospital. And once you get to that small roundabout into Muthaiga, it starts from there and all the way to the interchange at Pangani. So this will mean that anyone coming from Kiambu Road or Thika Road will experience some slowed traffic once you get to that. Further back on Thika Road, nothing much to report, so that one is okay. Kiambu Road also is good so far. The only problem now is when you get to that area there at Pangani. After that, everything else is smooth all the way into town. Mombasa Road too, looking good this morning, nothing much to report. Jogoo Road as well, not so bad, but around there, Makadara, immediately after Buruburu, the Makadara stretch, there's a longer stretch in red, meaning...
Just after the bus station.
Just that Buruburu bus stop there, and just next to the train station, and it's a bit red. But after that, it's much easier even once you get to the city stadium roundabout, nothing much to report from that direction. Let's take a look at Langata Road, is also looking good, and the Southern Bypass too, looking good, nothing much to report. Finally, Wayakiwe. And Wayakiwe also, as far back as Kikuyu, is looking good all the way into town. And that's a traffic situation this morning. Apart from this, at the Pangani interchange, everything else is looking relatively good. For Friday, I think watu wamechelewa, but I'm wondering what the problem could be.
Ama labda wameamua anze Friday mapema.
Friday ilianza jana.
Oh, yeah. Friday Junior.
Yeah, Friday Junior.
Oh, yes.
And you know, tomorrow there's a holiday that many people are feeling is a bit wasted. It falls on a Saturday, But don't worry, there's another one. We'll talk about it later. It'll be coming in the middle of June. There's another holiday that could fall on a Monday.
Oh, yes.
Interestingly.
The Muslim one.
Idul Adha.
Idul Adha. Let's give you the weather updates in Nairobi and its metropolitan regions. I've talked about parts of the River Pale, parts of Kiambu, how it is going to be looking like for today. So in Nairobi right now, it feels like 14 degrees Celsius, about 15 there. Precipitation 5%. This shows you the amount of rainfall that you do expect. So today I do expect some sunny intervals until the evening. Chances of it raining, some light showers for the day after 4 p.m. there is some quite minimal. This is one of those days that I advise you highly. Toka kazi mapema. and just
hakuna mvua fanya kazi kesho ni holiday.
But in case upatane na mvua when you're leaving work, unaweza ingia mahali urelax hadi utoke. Sasa shida ni ulizwe ulikuwa wapi. Bungoma, and so this is just in case, because all roads will be leading to Bungoma tomorrow for the 61st Madaraka Day celebrations. So just taking a look at what and how the weather is going to be looking like. What do you expect actually for that bit? Relatively okay, by the way. From the morning all the way, temperatures expect to increase, some sunny intervals and then some light showers. Thunderstorms, it promises to get some above average. 60% is above average, kidogo. But then ile tu ya kidogo tu, and then it promises to get continue as normal, the cold temperatures for the night. That is how Bungoma is looking like. We'll be giving you live coverage of this.
And as you mentioned, all the roads are leading to Bungoma. The president is already in that direction. He left yesterday and hit the road. He drove towards Kakamega and he made a few stopovers. Yes, so he'll be in Bungoma tomorrow.
But he's also expected to be in Nakuru today.
Yes, Nakuru is on the road
for the graduation. So anapitia Nakuru.
Anapitia kiendaga pole pole.
For the cadet graduation, which is happening this morning, and then
anaenda pole pole.
Okay, so. And finally, into Kajiado, 40 degrees Celsius, precipitation 0%. If you're in Kajiado and its environs, like in Kitengela, Isinya and all that, this is how things are looking like. A very nice day to just relax and be sun-kissed. Bigger picture there, because it's going to be a wonderful day for you this morning.
And enjoy the dust as well in Kitengela.
On a dust as much as possible. Oh yes. Let's take a look at Today in History before we get our cue to the newspaper review.
Today in History. Egypt's military announced that the country's emergency law, which allowed authorities to detain people without charge since Anwar Sadat's 1981 assassination, expired on this day.
All right, and that's our cue to take a look at the dailies this morning. Image iko pale kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Pulse. I'm sure you must be excited. But hey, let's talk about the front page of the Standard newspaper. Remember that story about it is my friends. No, it's not me. It's not me. Sio haikuwa mimi. Rafiki zangu waliamua tu. So Ruto hustler jets. The talk flies into crosswinds. That's the biggest discussion on this paper and on others. We'll be looking at them. On the Standard, they say, where lies truth? Another nice play of words there, and it's a question. Tough questions are being asked after the president claimed the luxury aeroplane he used for the state visit to the US was paid for by his friends. Who are these friends? What was their interest in the trip? Was the law breached in entering into such a deal? And why was KQ dragged into the matter earlier? The story is on page 4 of the Standard. And one wonders, did the president really have to respond to this?
Because, I mean, he took a moment, some seconds, and then he was like, you know what? You guys don't even know the whole story. Let me serve you the tea.
He went off script just to reveal this. Yes. And I don't know. The necessity of that, I'm not sure. Yes, on the front page of the Standard, a photo of the president, the first lady, his deputy, and the second lady as they attended the prayer breakfast yesterday at Safari Park Hotel. The story on that prayer breakfast is on page 2 for those who didn't watch it live. Other stories given prominence on the front page. Duale, keep off military choppers. The Defense CS Aden Duale has announced that military helicopters will no longer be available for use by politicians to limit their misuse. This should have happened decades ago. Another highlight, pass NADCO report without editing. Oh, there's still the NADCO report. I thought we had moved on from that. It's on page 6 of the Standard. Elsewhere, politicians in fans plea ahead of Madaraka. The president landed in Bungoma to preside over tomorrow's Makadara Day, with local politicians calling for revival of the sugar industry and equity in the disbursement of development funds. That story is on page 10 of the Standard. And yes, according to this report, the president already landed in Bungoma. Yeah. He begins a tour of Western as leader cites bias, so he's already on that end. On the top strip of the front page of the Standard, family says Kirui body will remain on Mount Everest. And for those who've been able to climb or have been following stories about climbers on that mountain, many people who have died while attempting the climb to the summit, most of the bodies have just been left there
and stay in the mountain.
Yes, and
some of the summits, be one of the mountains.
Some of the landmarks have been named after people who died along those areas. Anyway, elsewhere, millions splashed in UDA polls. Yes, today is a big day for the UDA party. A lot happening in different counties, especially when it comes to the constituency leadership elections. On the international scene, of course, the focus is on the South African elections. SA counting votes as ANC mulls future. And finally, crunch time as Shujaa chase 7th title. On the back page is Masters Football. This is how we'll stop Real Madrid. 11 years after a heartbreaking Champions League final loss to arch-rivals Bayern Munich, Borussia Dortmund veterans Mats Hummels and Marco Reus are returning to Wembley tomorrow to set things right. Ironically, this is being played at the Wembley Stadium.
Where
in London, where none of the English teams will be present. But hey, lovers of UEFA Champions League, tomorrow is a big one. And that's the Standard this morning.
All right. On the front page of the Daily Nation, they say HustlerJet, the Dubai connection, friends with benefits is what they're asking. Who paid for the visit and why? As the president reveals Emirati connection in an American visit, questions emerge of a sweet deal, the need for public disclosures, and how far quote-unquote friends can go in the context of interstate relations. More is on pages 4 and 5. There's a quote there by the president. But just other stories that do concern you. View on the bottom, finance experts warn against car and cooking oil taxes. The 2.5% there, the proposed tax based on the value of the vehicle, according to the Finance Bill 2024. On the left, matters arts. Inside, Eddie Butita's bromance with Ruto. And his newfound camaraderie with the President William Ruto has been overwhelming. And the recent trip only fanned the flames. Good for him. And on the bottom, there's a very interesting story there. So they say a petition in the Employment and Labor Relations Court by the Kenya Union of Post-Primary Education Teachers, KUPPET, seeks to revoke monthly burial and benevolent fund deductions from female teachers' pay slips. That is on the back page where you can flip. And they say the contested 200 Kenya shillings deduction appears on payslips as Social Welfare Association dues to Kenya Women Teachers Association. Wow, that's quite a story. On the top, moment of reckoning, Kenya's Shujaa kick-off final attempt to gain promotion to World 7 Series in Madrid today. That is on page 42. That in a nutshell is the Daily Nation. Seeing you hold the Business Daily.
Yes, so the Business Daily matters deposits into banks. Windfall for depositors as interest rates hit 24-year high. Banks are offering handsome returns to retain deposits and 10.32% on fixed deposits. This is the highest since 2000. And they say cash-rich farms and individuals earned 62.7 billion shillings in the first quarter to March as return on deposits hit that 24-year high amid cutthroat competition. So yes, if you are cash-rich right now, just put your money in the bank. At 10.32% return is not so bad. Yeah. Double-digit return on deposits. Kama hauna mpango ya vile pesa itafanya, weka pesa kwa bank. Although many people advise not to. Elsewhere on the ticker, still on the front page of the Business Daily, Ruto flies into new storm over private jet gifts from friends. Elsewhere, India topless UAE as Kenya's second largest top polls. I said topless. Sorry for that. It's a Friday.
I understand tomorrow is your birthday, but
India topples UAE as Kenya's second largest sauce market. I had to go back. Okay, what was that? Another one, stockbrokers at NSE fight for survival. And finally, new funds leverage tech to attract unit trust customers. Let's take a quick look at the other dailies, 3 or 4 of them, before we take a look at the cartoons, because we need to venture into the discussion soon enough. And on the People Daily, more tax burden as Treasury hits again. And they talk about the government policy proposal seeking to reduce or eliminate tax incentives as exemptions and allowances. Wow. Wale wajasoma finance bill, something else coming for you. That's a big headline on the front page of the People Daily. Of course, a mention of the Ruto US jet saga, and finally the South African elections on the front page of the People Daily. All right, you have the Star?
I do have the Star. I was taking a look at Stano's cartoon, but then we'll get to that on People Daily. Sakaja versus Gachagua, litmus test for DP as Nairobi UDA delegates vote. And we'll be giving you more of this coverage for today as it unfolds for today. Whatever Nairobi governor was talking about, we'll be seeing how that will be unfolding today and how that will be happening because the first one that happened around Nairobi, there was chaos and people saying, there was not enough ballot papers and so much.
Oh, yes. They've been doing it at different levels. Yes. So today I think they're doing it at the constituency level. A quick look at the cartoons on the page 14 of the Star. They talk about the handshake government on fire and the Kenya Kwanza also on fire. So someone Mount Kenya jumping from the handshake government to the Kenya Kwanza coalition, from a frying pan into the direct fire. On page 18 of the Daily Nation, they talk about President's Hustler jet, the choice between the national carrier Kenya Airways and the private charter, and the president saying that's what friends are for. Yeah.
On People Daily, page 10, the jet is also reflected here, and a huge head of caricature that resembles President William Ruto coming out of that jet, and he is saying, friends of Kenya paid for the jet. And Common Monanchi just outside this jet saying, buddies of a feather, that ... alama za dukuduku pale. Ask them to pay for us our crazy taxes then.
By the kama wanaweza saidia to that extent, so watusaidie tu waendelee.
I mean, friends with benefits. Oh yes. Stano is doing the Lord's work this week.
All right, we'll be looking at this and a lot more, including what's happening in South Africa, and to Bwana Malema, Julius Malema. And Mkoto
Umkhonto esizwe.
This Mokua, a political risk analyst, will be in studio for that discussion alongside Susan Wanjiro and Hafith Mohamud. Do stand by for that. And you can be part of this conversation as well on social media. On X, our handle is at TV47 News, and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya.
Oh yes. Later on, we serve you some classic band, some top classic band. This is one of those days that you just, even as you're taking your breakfast, wherever you're in the office, kwa nyumba, just relax and enjoy some cool acoustic kind of music. From 8 a.m. all the way to 10 a.m. We'll be around here with our weekend queue, Gashambi and Ritu, for that, just, get to know.
We have here.
Tunaenda kujirusha.
That one. You're watching Morning Cafe. Let's take a break now. All right, welcome back. You're watching TV47. This is the Morning Cafe with me, Freddie Ndimuli. Time for us to take a look at the headlines this morning. And to help us do this, we are very much privileged to have with us in studio Hafidh Mohamud. Karibu sana.
Thank you. Good morning.
Next to Bwana Hafidh, we have Dismas Mukua, political risk analyst. It's good to have you at TV47. Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
And Susan Wanjiru, political analyst, also joins us this Friday. It's good to have you in studio.
Thank you, Fred. Good morning, Kenyans.
Okay, if you look at the dailies today, of course, there's one particular discussion, and we'll be getting to that. A quick look at the trends on X. And there's a lot of mention about Malema, this hashtag SA Elections 2024. We also have mention of South Africa and Trump as well. And these are the local discussions happening in Kenya. So this is what people are talking about. But a quick look at the dailies, and we'll come back to this discussion. A quick look at what people are talking about on day 2 is what the president said about the Hustler's jet, and we start with that. And on the front page of the Standard, Ruto Hustler jet talk flies into crosswinds, and they ask a number of questions on the front page of the Standard. Who are these friends? What was their interest in the trip? Was a law breached in entering into such a deal? And why was KQ dragged into the matter earlier? On the front page of the Daily Nation, Hustler jet, the Dubai connection, more questions. Who paid for his visit and why? Yes. Tukiangazia gazeti zingine kama vile ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo ambaye pia imeangazia habari hii, wanasema marafiki walinilipia. William Ruto sasa ametakiwa kudhibitisha kuwa ziara aliyofanya majuzi nchini Amerika ilifadhiliwa na marafiki wa Kenya na kwamba iligharimu mlipa ushuru chini ya milioni 10. Let's start from there. And Susan, what was your reaction? Because many people are asking, what was the necessity of the president coming to give such a defense that leaves more questions than answers?
Wow, this is something that has refused to go away. 1 week down the line, Kenyans are still talking about it, and it's unfortunate that we've been receiving different stories. First, it was the American government. Second, it was a lot of stories. But now again, yesterday we received another story that it was a friend who paid for the jet. So I tend to think we still have no exact person who paid for the jet. Was it the government? Was it US? Was it the friends? So Kenyans will still ask these questions, and I think we should push them to tell us exactly.
Do you think it was necessary for the president to give the explanation he gave yesterday? He initially said KQ, it was cheaper than KQ. And although many people asked questions, the debate was almost dying down. And then he comes out and says, okay, fine, it was less than 10 million bob.
Fred, I don't think the story was dying, because if we look at how the president came in, he came in as a humble president, fighting for small mwananchi. And I think the conversation, you see, the president has the intelligence every morning, in the evening, the conversations that are going on the ground. And I think this is something that hustlers have been talking about. And I think he feels he owes Kenya an explanation on how he would travel on a 200 million jet. And why would, back in 2017, we said we are buying Kenya, building Kenya. Here again, he's trashing the Kenyan product. So he owes Kenyans an explanation on how he ended up using a jet from Dubai.
Yep. It's not the first time that William Ruto is being accused of being a bit or seeking luxury, especially in his mode of transportation. It happened again in 2015. When initially now the initial title Hustler Jet came out on a trip to South Africa. It is a kind of person he is, probably, that this is how he prefers to travel. But do you think the kind of explanation is giving Kenyans actually does fly? Because the questions are now more than initially, even when he had remained silent.
You know, you're asking fundamental questions. and whether it was appropriate for him to respond the way he did yesterday. And in my view, that is the kind of transparency we need as a nation, because President Ruto is the head of state and is the head of government. And any expenditure incurred by State House or office of the president must be subject to public scrutiny. And when wananchi come up through social media and other avenues asking these deep and pertinent questions, it's incumbent on the president to give us very elaborate answers, or maybe some officials from State House to give us very elaborate answers, because Mura back at home wants to know whether or not she's getting value for her taxes. That is the first part. Now, the second part, when you're going to the US on this kind of a high-level visit, when you're the president of a nation, you need to have your office in space. And I recall some time ago when Professor Njuguna Karanja indicated that when President Moi is out of town, is the acting president, and he actually got into trouble for that. So when President Ruto moves to the US, he moves as an institution. So he moves with his office, with his key personnel. So I'd like you to imagine him receiving a security brief in a commercial flight with all the passengers listening. So in my view, there are some comforts and luxuries that are supposed to be afforded that office. Can you imagine if he uses a normal commercial flight, then when he's on his transit, one of his bags goes to another destination, then he lands in the US, and his bag carrying one of his counters has gone to another country, Namibia. You know, it would embarrass the president. That does not mean that there must be no austerity measures. There must be austerity measures, and he must sweat the Kenyan shilling. In the West, they would say sweat the dollar, but he must sweat the Kenyan shilling.
That's a whole argument, because people would argue that even KQ planes can actually be reconfigured to provide the kind of comforts that the president would need for such a trip, because this is part of government. But now, when you talk about a donation for a president to go on a state visit, as a state officer, there are laws governing what kind of gifts a president can receive. Hence the many questions that people are asking. No one can just give you a gift of that magnitude without expecting anything in return. Those are the questions people are asking, not even about the cost of the trip. It's now you're telling us it's people who donated this to us. At what cost?
Yes, so in my view, the president gave a general statement. Now it's incumbent on the officials at State House to offer clarity. That what is the mathematics and the philosophy behind these gifts? Is it, does it offend any laws in Kenya? Does it put the president in a place where he has to return the favor in future? So I would expect, actually, Kenyans have got valid expectations that officers at State House are going to clear the air. Because if they don't do that, then they're going to ask many more questions, and the president will keep on giving brief answers, while in fact there must be competent officers within State House or Office of the President who can do a media release to offer clarity. But on the flip side, it should not be lost on Kenyans on the gains made from the trip in the US, on the matters of economic diplomacy. And I know you're a communication scholar. It's when you fail to offer clarity on the cost of the trip or on the mode of transportation, now the gains get lost, because this trip achieved tremendous gains, you know, from economic diplomacy. You know, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, under the instructions of the President, headed by Musalia Mudavadi, have been driving economic diplomacy. When you look at the fact sheets of the gains from the US, it's just amazing. So if the officials from State House don't offer clarity, then Mura back in the village will start consuming the cost of the flight and the donation, instead of appreciating the benefits. And when you look at the benefits, they're amazing. A university called Dedan Kimathi is now getting a grant of $1.2 million to go into the semiconductor business. Kenyan soldiers will be going to some of the top US colleges for training. So there are many benefits. And it's a basic thing in communication, that if you do not highlight the good news, then anything which appears to be controversial will occupy a lot of media. Okay,
there's still debate on if at all those are benefits without Kenya being expected to give anything back in return. But Bwana Hafidh, are you convinced by the kind of explanation given by the president. And do you feel that that statement he made almost casually, going off script to say, by the way, it cost us less than 10 million shillings. You know how much 10 million shilling is. You followed that trip to the US. Are you convinced by that conversation?
Good morning once again. Thank you for having me here. First and foremost, as a person, I cannot say I'm convinced by the way my president explained his trip and how it costed Kenyans. To him, a mere 10 million. But to us, we heard stories before even it comes to president's explanation, that there were 200 million cost, that the jet itself was different from what we expected as Kenyans for him to take the KQ flight. But before I much explain, my friend here touched on something. He said that maybe our KQ is not that much convenient for president to take. He simply said, if the president were to take maybe these commercial flights and he gets that briefing, I think to me the president has been traveling, our president has been traveling before. It's not his first time traveling outside. He traveled to most parts of the world. And we never saw such maybe stories. That means, was he not getting brief at the beginning when he was traveling outside? I think he was still doing. So that means KQ or our own still have that comfort. So that one, to me, is not much explanation. But coming to president giving this kind of, let me call it funny explanation, he gave it because I think he was under pressure. He was also reading news, he was following how Kenyans were maybe a bit angry, some maybe speculating that our president is no longer the hustler, he used to say. When he was campaigning, one of his main agenda was to cut down on unnecessary expenditure by the government. But the moment he came into office, we are seeing now that is another story. Because how he moves, starting from even how his cabinets move around. So the president feels that, okay.
Even the choice of cars.
Yeah, even the choice of cars, the numbers of fleets he's flying around with. So president feels, okay, as much as I wanted nobody to know this story, now it's out. So he had to. He has no option other than coming to explain. But the way he did was a bit funny.
10 million, and I think even the figure itself.
Actually, he said
less than 10 million.
We watched, he was in the US for like 5 days plus. We saw the kind of entourage he went with. And these people definitely, even just paying for accommodation there and all this other, just ensuring that his entourage is comfortable going there and back, because some of them did not even use the same flight as he did. Some other arrangements had to be made. So when he says that the cost was less than 10 million shillings, did he really have to give that figure? In terms of communication, probably that has left more questions than answers, don't you think?
Yeah, it has. And I think going forward, maybe we should be having a brief. Although Hussein Mohammed, the spokesperson for State House, had gave us the brief on what the president is traveling to do. I think we should be auditing first before he leaves how he's going to travel and everything, so that going forward we don't have million stories coming out on how much the Kenyan taxpayer is needed to spend to see our president going out there. And then we also had stories, even when the president Uhuru Kenyatta was traveling, we were told all these things will bring benefit in our country. But eventually we don't see these things materializing, or when they materialize, we don't get to, now like this trip, it's over like that. I don't think we're going to follow up on how beneficial it was to our country. So going forward, I think the government should be accountable.
And Dismas, you had mentioned the fact that there could be benefits accrued from that trip, but now all that will be lost in the face of this debate. If the president is reading the newspapers today, his statement yesterday must have been a massive failure, if at all that was a kind of communication he was hoping would change the narrative.
You know, I normally have interactions with people I call the youth, and anybody who is younger than me, I consider them to be the youth. So we were discussing these US state visits, and I was shocked. There are majority of the members in that panel were looking for sensational or controversial news. So when you go through the list of benefits, the grants, the bilaterals assigned, nobody pays attention. And it's a classic thing that you learn in the School of Journalism or Communication when a dog bites a man or when a man bites a dog, which is the reason that the competent officers within State House, they need to offer clarity on these 10 million. And then I'll keep on highlighting the benefits every single day. Because the lady on my right and the gentleman on my left are really concerned about the cost of the trip. And in business and statecraft, normally the issue is not even the cost of the trip.
But do you think the president himself is feeding into that sensationalism by giving a figure that doesn't sound convincing at all? He should have stayed away from that debate.
No, from when he was in the US, he had an interview with an international channel, and one of the anchors posed the question that what is the cost of this trip? He indicated that some officers are going to answer. When he came back to Nairobi, his employers, who are the voters, posed the same question. So the voters in Kenya, Mura, has got a very valid expectation that he must answer. How did you travel? How many people were in your delegation? What value did they add while they were in the US? Were they just part of the president's escort, or they were actually adding value? When you're having the bilateral conversations, when you went to White House, what was the value? So there's a need to have that clarity, because if you don't present that clarity today, it's going to be the topic of conversation for a long time. And then at some stage, people may say, wait a minute, the president was in the United States 1 year, 2 years ago. What happened? And the gentleman on my left has raised a very fundamental question, that we have an equivalent of Kenya Air Force One. My understanding is that it cannot go for more than 5 hours without stopping somewhere to refill or maybe to go through the regular maintenance. And understand the trip to Atlanta. I mean, I spoke to some aviation professionals. They say these are 20 hours. So when you're on a 20-hour trip, you need some conveniences, you need some pleasure, so that you can keep on discharging your mandate as the head of state. Now,
KQ has certain things that can do that.
Now, reconfiguring KQ to offer you that facility, one would start asking, what would be the cost of reconfiguring KQ to convert it to make it a presidential? That would be the first question. And then number two, taking that KQ flight, would it actually affect KQ's schedules? Because I understand all these airlines operate on fixed schedules. So when the president says that I'm going to be using these KQ, I don't know what they're called, buying, I don't know those initials, for say, for 7 days, will it inconvenience other clients? If you're flying to JFK, you would get a notification that this flight is not available on account of a presidential trip. So there are so many dynamics. But for me, at the end of the day, speaking as a communication professional, there's an urgent need for State House to offer clarity that this is how the president traveled, this is how the 10 million...
So you do agree communication from State House and even from the president himself is wanting?
You know, for the president, he sets the overall agenda by giving agenda statements, but I suspect there are competent officers who are supposed to break this down. Because when he mentioned that during one of the interviews in the US, I expected that somebody here would break it down so that we stop asking these questions. Like, for instance, now this morning, we've spent 10 minutes, more than 10 minutes, discussing that instead of asking us, when he came back, what are the benefits from the White House fact sheet? What are the benefits of this trip?
Okay. What Kenyans are talking about is a Hustler jet, and it's actually on the front page of the Daily Nation. Hustler jet, the same two words appearing on the front page of the Standard, Ruto Hustler jet, and I guess this discussion will definitely continue. The debate on the Hustler jet is back. Time for us to take a break. When we come back, we take a look at the finance bill, which is another big debate and probably what people should be talking more about, the issue of taxation, as we get closer to June, which is when we expect the budget estimates to be presented before the National Assembly. You're watching Morning Cafe. Back. You're still watching Morning Cafe on TV 47 with me, Fred Indimuli. We'll continue looking at some of the headlines, the big headlines today, this Friday, with Hafidh Mohamud, political analyst, Dismas Mukua, political risk analyst, and Susan Wanjiru, a political analyst. I want us to focus on something else that also is given prominence on the front page of the Daily Nation this Friday, and that's the finance bill. And they say finance experts are warning against car and cooking oil taxes. Experts have criticized the inclusion of a vehicle tax in the 2024 finance bill, arguing it violates the constitution. And meanwhile, MPs clashed with edible oil manufacturers over the impending price increase. The National Assembly Committee on Trade, Industries and Cooperation disputed the justification of the expected 160 shillings per litre price increment. That's on edible oils, yes? And yesterday, I think yes, it was a Star that went to the headline, why prices of chapati and mandazi are set to rise. It's definitely going to have an impact, and this probably is a discussion that many Kenyans should be having. It is admirable that Kenyans are now scrutinizing the finance bill better than they've done before. Starting from what happened last year with the finance bill 2023, the kind of debate around these pieces of legislation and the proposals taken to the National Assembly around the budgeting process are receiving much better scrutiny from Kenyans. Question is, are they receiving as much scrutiny or attention from members of the National Assembly who are supposed either to vote for it or to make amendments for it? Susan, and are you confident that given the actions we saw last year from members of the National Assembly, that this time round things could be different, that probably we'll see some considerable adjustments to some of these proposals that have caused uproar by Kenyans?
Yeah, thank you, Fred. I don't expect much from the members of National Assembly, because most of the time they vote as what their leaders would want to, the voting should go. And so Kenyans are talking about it, and every day we are having different reactions. We would see also on social media like TikTok, we have Kenyans who are coming up trying to explain to fellow Kenyans what exactly is happening and how we are going to forge forward after this. And I think a few things are really pestering Kenyans. It's the motor vehicle tax. Most people are saying these vehicles, most of them are loan cars. And it's going to affect Kenyans. Indeed, it's going to affect Kenyans. But most of the time, I think the government sometimes wanarusha just to see how far Kenyans can go. I remember last year we had taxes on ID, marriage certificates, again, and we had this heated debate, and we saw Kindiki coming out and saying also changing things here and there. So it's a conversation that it's still going on, because also we see most of the Kenyans, young people who are the content creators, we've seen their gadgets also, they are being taxed, and we are hoping that it won't go the way it is right now. And
you must admit, yes, there's a general better understanding or better apprehension about comprehension about what is contained in the finance bill this time round. More and more people are talking about it, and as she mentioned, even on TikTok and social media, there are more people coming out and saying, even if you've not read the finance bill, this is what it's saying. Now, these are experts who are giving their opinion as required by law through public participation. But many people are questioning the necessity or the consequence of public participation. We saw last year many people complained about certain proposals that still were passed through Parliament and voted in. This time round, do you think you are confident enough that this finance bill will receive proper scrutiny from the National Assembly?
Let's begin from last year. It was very embarrassing when some members of the National Assembly indicated that they are not socialized with the proposed legislation. So they said that, they've been members of the National Assembly, one of their principal roles is legislation. And the finance bill becomes law. So they indicated that when they received that bill like this, they did not socialize with the documents. So they voted for a document whose contents they did not know. That is an MP on record who proudly made the remarks at a public rally. Then another one said that they are very busy. They did not have time to go through the documents. So the normal Kenyan would ask, if one of your principal roles at the National Assembly is legislation, where else are you supposed to be when you are making these laws? And what else are you supposed to be doing?
But we've had a member of the National Assembly proudly declare that he does not even go to the National Assembly.
Yeah, so let's go to that job description. You are elected to represent your constituency at the National Assembly. When you are abandoned responsibility, then you say, I'm not supposed, I don't need to go to the National Assembly, I'm going to be re-elected, or I was too busy, or I didn't have I didn't have time to go through the documents. Then it means that those are candidates for an electoral beating, that the voters back at home should not re-elect those kinds of persons. Because according to our constitution, all of us Kenyans cannot fit at the National Assembly. So we have given a selected number of people powers to go and represent us. When they fail to deliver on their primary mandates, we must punish them. And we punish them by giving them a one-way ticket home. That is number two. Then you ask the role of public participation. And it's very exciting that the average Kenyan today knows the impact of tax on their bank balance or on their pesa mfukoni, and are following the conversations with a lot of interest. And then, of course, we've had experts and lobbyists presenting their views, because of public participation. But, still at the end of the day, the members of the National Assembly are not bound to implement what you've presented. So because, sometimes you wonder that a committee at the National Assembly, in one day, they've received up to 30 delegations. So you begin to wonder, did these delegations have sufficient time to prosecute their cases? Sometimes you're told to send your views via email. So you also ask yourself, do they have time to listen through this? So really, at the end of the day, the buck stops with the members of the National Assembly that we elect. Because they can have public participation at KCC or at the top of Mount Kenya or Lake Victoria. You go there, you present your views, you make very cogent presentations. But at the end of the day, the members of the National Assembly have got the yam and the knife. Because when they go to the plenaries, when they go to the committees of the entire House, committee of the whole way, they're making legislation, still it's their word. But if they know that if they don't capture the aspirations and interests of Mura, they will go back home, then they'll be very careful. But most of them tend to flick the bird on Kenyans because they know that the average Kenya is an emotional and irrational voter. So it doesn't matter how I vote at the National Assembly, I will still go and convince them using my CDF. In the US and in the UK, they've got something, especially in the UK, they've got something they call clinics that are every weekend or every once in a while, you go back to your voters and you have word with them. And they tell you these are our positions. When you do not vote in that manner, others recall you. In Kenya, you cannot recall an MP. It's almost impossible. And even in the US, people call on their senators and congressmen and present positions. We should do the same in Kenya. And for those who do not vote with our interests and aspirations in mind, then we punish them at the ballot.
And my question had been whether you are confident that this time around there'll be any different kind of approach from the members of the National Assembly. Because yes, we're called upon to engage in public participation. Yes, we understand a lot more than we did understand a few years back. So we are ready to offer suggestions. But do you feel that there'll be any consequence this time round?
Thank you. Let me take yesterday's theme, maybe kuna hope, of which I'm not so sure still, because looking at the last year's finance bill, which is Act, I think we had a very rigorous public participation. Different group presented their memoranda to the committee, and we saw it live, that 98% of the same memoranda that was presented were against some, maybe if not all, part of the finance bill. By then, what consequences did it have at that time? Because these are the same member of parliament. These are the same MPs. I think we never changed MPs from last year up to date. They're still same. So I don't see much difference in the same MPs who, in the last finance bill, we saw them reading A, but doing B. Absolutely differently.
There has been some movement politically, at least, because the problem has always been the kind of influence that the executive has on the majority it controls within Parliament. And one may wonder, with what has been happening probably in the last week or so, especially with the cracks within the main UDA party. Of course, you've heard of the divisions in Mount Kenya. Could that in itself be a positive contribution towards a better debate in this?
At one point, I think we have seen a bit of slight change when it comes to MPs doing their job. Of late, we can pick that impeachment of the CS for agriculture. Yes. We have seen MPs voting. By the way, I think that was my first time seeing MPs vehemently voting on an impeachment of a CS. Which, despite the fact that eventually it will. Yeah, I know they are playing some sort of PR with us, we understand, but at least they have done something. Close to 100 and something members of Parliament put in their signatures that they are supporting it. Though they knew that 11-member committee will do what they always do. But coming to this finance bill, maybe our hope will be people now understand that this animal called finance bill, at least even the lowest person somewhere in my village understands, okay, the life is a bit hard because of this animal called finance. But the MPs, those who we delegated our powers to, will definitely fail us. That one I can assure any Kenya anywhere, simply because these MPs have been seeing the BPS, the budget policy statement. That I think that was the beginning. So we are seeing their reaction to the same. Somebody said, okay, it was just a proposal. Maybe they reduced a little bit from there, the whole budget, 4-point-something trillion to 3.9. That reduction doesn't mean, okay, they will still go and do clause by clause. Look at this motor vehicle, no. Look at this, no. But I'm sure they will have their own meeting with the president and with their leaders.
It's that question I'm more concerned about, how the politics will play into debate about the finance bill this time round. With the kind of, because we've had even threats that because of the cracks that we have within the UDA party, which is the biggest party within the coalition, we will shoot down the finance bill. We've had those threats. And if and when the president calls for a PG meeting, probably sometime next week, he's not sure that he's going to meet a unified UDA party or Kenya Kwanza properly marshaled numbers in the House. Could this play a part in better scrutiny? Because we had last year, and he mentioned it, that MPs said they did not scrutinize properly because they followed the party line. Yes? Will they this time around, because of the divisions within the party, everyone speaking differently, will they be able now to sit back and say, okay, fine, let's now focus on the people at least for once?
Okay, going by what happened yesterday, Fred, we saw the person who was actually bringing the cracks in the ruling party was the deputy president. But yesterday he mellowed the mood, and I would see it seems like things are going back to normal. Again, there is a conversation going on that the cracks we are having in UDA, it's a distraction for Kenyans to focus on political side of it and to leave the financial bill debate. But I don't expect much from the cracks we are having because these people have a common goal. At the end of the day, William Ruto is the head of the party, and I think most of them will go by what he wants. We've not reached where we can say indeed these MPs will go by the political mood. Yeah. So
the president does not look as one bit threatened by the alleged or apparent cracks within his party or coalition. He looks very comfortable. He appears very sure that he can still marshal the numbers like he did last year.
Well, you know, some party officials, UDA party officials, said that the cracks, as are so described, are a creation of media and bloggers. So he said, in fact, he's not aware of any crack. But going to the question that you posed to Wanjiku, the vigorous debates we had around the finance bill last year, and even some farmers in parts of central Kenya protesting, even parts of Nyanza province and the coast protesting, making loud noises, I think they can threaten the members of the National Assembly. Because the only thing members of the National Assembly respond to is the fear or probability of losing their seats. So if they're going to lose their seats on account of failure to defend their morale, then they can respond. And one would expect that when Kenya Kwanza parliamentary group have their, when they have their group meetings, they would engage in very agile conversations with the interests of Wanjiku in mind. That while the national government has got their priorities, but they should look at the pesa on Fukoni. Because you can come up with all these tax-raising measures, and then at the end of the day, the rule of diminishing returns begins to set in. That there is no more income for you to tax. So in my view, they need to have those rigorous conversations, not just Kenya Kwanza, even Azimio, and make sure that when they are voting, they vote with morale in mind. That way then I will make progress. And then secondly, increase the tax base. Because sometimes the people come up with the fiscal policies and strategies, they just want to tax a small group of taxpayers. They need to get innovative ways of making sure that anybody with income in Kenya falls within that bracket. Now, if they do that, then Kenyans will be happy. And it's time for, in my view, for all registered voters in Kenya to start keeping records. So that during the next elections in 2027, if there's an elected member of the National Assembly who did not vote for morale's interest, then they penalize them. But if we create an environment when members know that they don't need to read the bills, they don't need to be in the House, they can vote as they deem fit, and nothing will happen, then they'll keep on stepping on our toes. In other words, we must remove that utadu mentality from the members of the National Assembly, because they know they'll vote however they want, and namtadu.
Wow, interesting. It features on the front page of the Daily Nation. Finance experts warn against car and cooking oil taxes, and also on the front page of the People Daily, which talks about more tax burden as Treasury hits again. It's definitely one of those conversations that will continue as we get closer to the passing of the finance bill and the budget estimates. You wanted to add something on the same?
Yeah, on the crack in UDA, I think it's quite funny that we know trends of our politicians in this country, that most of the things are done for PR. The cracks within the ruling party seems, if you look at it from different lenses, is that everyone is pulling their side. It's not that much concerned that maybe, okay, members of parliament or the governors or even the deputy president realize that he's not doing much for the country. Now they are looking at their ruling party as, okay, can we look at it objectively and see we are not doing much? No, it's only their personal interest. Because we have heard several times that, okay, I will make noise from one end so that I will attract attention of maybe the president or the powers that be, nitapelekwa mahali, then we'll talk. The moment now what I wanted is attended to, that issue of cracks and whatever remains within social media. Okay. That's why we are seeing now, okay, the deputy president has been speaking in different tunes for some time. And yesterday, the way Mr. said, you can read his body language that, okay, with the president coming in, maybe, this is just a speculation, they have said somewhere, wamekunywa coffee.
He's not happy.
Now everything is okay.
All right, so we do not expect a lot of opposition to the finance bill. I think that's a general agreement on this panel, that things will be more or less the same as they were last year.
No. I think last year really made Kenyans understand the impacts and imports of the finance bill. The way you've indicated, somebody in Elwak Mandera knows the impacts and imports of the finance bill. Somebody in Musocho, in Mukurweini, they know. And they'll be applying pressure on the members of the National Assembly. And the members of the National Assembly know that the average Kenyan is now alive to the finance bill. Because now you go to a matatu, you go to a market, you go to a baraza, you go everywhere. People are discussing the finance bill. In fact, the finance bill now has produced about 50 million economists in Kenya. Even kids.
Everyone is an expert.
Everybody has become an expert. So they're having conversations. And as indicated, the challenge now is on the various parliamentary groups to ensure that they have their own internal conversations which are aligned to Mura's interest. And for anybody who betrays the Kenyan cause at the National Assembly, they should be penalized on election day.
Wow. Interesting conversations around the Finance Bill 2024. Will it be more of what we saw last year with the Finance Bill of 2023, which is now an act? I want us to move from that conversation and now focus a bit on what's happening outside our borders, beyond our borders, with the elections in South Africa. And quick results, what you're seeing, at least in some of the international media, ANC still in the lead, 42.34%, followed closely by the, not really closely, followed some distance by the Democratic Alliance with 23.39%. And then, interestingly, people had really expected Julius Malema's EFF to give a proper challenge to these top two parties, but it is Umkhonto weSizwe, led by Jacob Zuma, that is actually coming in third at about 10.7%, and then EFF then follows there with about 9.6%. But so far, about 52% of the votes cast being counted. Of course, more will happen, but let's start from there. When Julius Malema, and I can see a lot of celebrations by Kenyans online, it would appear Julius Malema had really acked a number of Kenyans with some of the statements he made when he landed in Kenya a few months ago. The people are saying, Kumbe, it was just hot air. We really thought you you have more gravitas on the ground. Hafid.
Yeah. Really, I think we know our African election is more like same across. If you bring same scenario back to this country, we know how BAMBA is before election. Everybody is there, okay, this time around, he is the president. When it comes to real casting day, then we see something different. As much as we'll have now other stories, or rigged, stolen, whatever it is, that's Africa.
But that comparison between Malema's performance right now and Raila Odinga's performance, Raila Odinga was a very close second.
Yeah.
Actually, it was 51 to about 50%.
Yeah, but if you look at that of South Africa, it's a bit different from ours, simply because the Zuma's party, MK, Zuma is not only maybe the former president, is a figure known as much as Malema is, but the politics around South Africa is quite different from ours. South Africa carries much more interest from across the continent and also the rest of the world. It is important because if we look at ANC, just from history, ANC is not just a normal party that is one of other parties. I think that is the oldest party in Africa, formed around 1912, if I'm not wrong. But the more, I think, the last 30 years of the democracy, the party is closely, let me not say diminishing, but going slow.
It's definitely weakening.
Simply because of, I cannot call it crack, but different formations, different branches from the same party, ANC. EFF, I think, was the youth wing at one point of the same ANC, Malema. When it comes to youth, we all have energies at one point. And our energy, as much as we try to have it in one box, make sure everyone is convinced with our energy, always a youthful person lacks the last shooting goal.
Okay.
The last strength.
But there's a lot of hope we are seeing. Okay, fine. The performance may not be that impressive, but from a youth wing to actually a party that could be called upon to join up with the main party because it would appear if things go the same way they are, even ANC might need to coalesce with another party for them to have the proper majority in parliament. EFF could be that party. For them to grow to that level as a youth wing, this is really admirable.
Yeah, it is. I must say that I'm so proud of Malema, though sometimes he appears to be very radical and like he's a madman sometimes, and the way he attacks you might think is just out of this world. And being South Africa the way it is, and ANC going down, I think it's a positive thing because it has been enjoying the fact that it fought for freedom for South Africa for a very long time, actually almost 30 years. And being that this time round it's going down, and the real issues that South Africans they would want to see being addressed, ANC is not able to address. So I would say it's a positive thing of what Malema is doing. Yes, he comes out strongly, but maybe as we look at the results coming in, we would say maybe he's not yet there, but I love his fighting spirit.
Okay, and yes, we do have some of the provisional results on our screen as they continue. And yes, it's still looking more or less the same with ANC, then the DA, then MK, and finally EFF. Of course, there are other smaller parties. But this definitely changes the matrix in as far as South African elections are concerned, and even the governance of South Africa. ANC for the last 30 years has enjoyed supermajority or a proper majority to form government without the help of anyone else. Now, they may be forced to bring in someone else into the governance of this country. And from the look of things, it's either you talk to Jacob Zuma or you talk to Julius Malema. That in itself has very serious implications in the performance of ANC. This could be a very troublesome marriage going forward, don't you think?
And that is a loaded question that requires a master's candidate or even a PhD candidate. But let's attempt to break it into three parts. Number one, ANC is following in the same trajectory like KANU. Most of the independent political parties, liberation political parties, for some reason, they start off as very powerful political parties, and decades later, they start going south, literally. Now in South Africa, literally ANC is going south because at some stage they have a very super majority, then it comes to a comfortable majority, then it comes to a whisker majority. Now they're playing around 43%. If our neighbors are not careful in Tanzania, even CCM will follow the same path. KANU did that a long time ago. But as a President Moi had predicted that KANU would rule Kenya for another 100 years, all the other political parties within South Africa, one would say that in fact they are subsidiaries of ANC. I mean, if you talk about Jacob Zuma, it's MK I mean, loosely speaking,
he's a former ANC party.
Yeah. When you talk about Malema and EFF, all the political parties, save for DA, which is again morphed out from during the apartheid era. So in my view, the political leaders of the liberation political parties, they must sit down and ask themselves that they had the credentials to fight for liberation, but do they have credentials to offer leadership? Because if you go to South Africa, I think South Africa probably has got the highest unemployment rates in Kenya. In the world. For the longest time, they've had rolling blackouts. But very strange, the last couple of weeks, there's no blackouts in South Africa. So people in South Africa are asking, wait a minute, how come we've been having these blackouts, but as we approach the elections, there is nothing happening? So in my view, there are lessons to be learned, and I suspect the people who are very nervous today is CCM. Because going to the election, Cyril Ramaphosa was very full of energy, and he said that this thing, we are going to make it. Now, President Kenyatta is in South Africa, heading a delegation which is observing votes, and nobody has complained about voter fraud. They've said there's a bit of logistical challenges. So it's very clear that the numbers, as you've positioned them on the screens, it's a true reflection of what the voters actually want. So that is the first level. Then the second level is the power of some powerful politicians. Like the colleague on my left has indicated that you have BAMBA in Kenya. And for Zuma, he establishes a political party less than 3 months to the elections, and then is garnering upwards of 10%. So you begin to ask that is voters who initially voted for ANC, were they loyal to the philosophies of ANC, or they were loyal, in fact, to Jacob Zuma? And you see where personal differences hurt a nation. Because the general conversation in the streets in South Africa, there are differences between President Ramaphosa and former President Zuma, which has led to all these things. And you remember the story of the State Capture Commission that Jacob Zuma said that it was no more than a personal vendetta from Ramaphosa. So you begin to ask yourself, when will Africa liberate itself from these powerful political personalities? But when you see what is happening in the US today, you discover that this thing is not limited to Africa. It's just the typical voter. Because there are people in the US today who have indicated from international channels that they're going to vote for Trump, whether or not he's convicted. Now he's been convicted, but they're saying that that is a two-level justice system in the US. They're still going to vote for him. So the political scientists and political psychologists, they need to start asking the question, how come voters have got this, what one may describe as an irrational connection with some leaders? Because at some stage, Trump said that I can go to New York Street and shoot somebody and you'll vote for me. So even right now, they said that he's been convicted by our justice system that you are still going to vote for him.
34 counts.
Yeah, 34. And all of them were unanimous. First count, tick. Second, tick. Those guys cleared their work, and I understand it was very elaborate. They had coffee and they went home. The third one is about a subject that I studied, the misinformation and disinformation. Because we understand that there are so many global players who want to influence voting in Africa. And the research has been done to the effect that there are many countries all over the world that want to impact the voting patterns. For instance, Russia is accused of influencing the US presidential elections. So even right now, the State Department in the US has declared the misinformation as a national security concern. The same Russia is accused of propaganda around Brexit. There are a number of people who voted to get out of Brexit, while in fact, they did not know what they were voting for. So it's after they begin to see the Brexit implications, then they sit back and ask themselves, wait a minute, what did we vote for? And a few days ago, when the US was supposed to vote on allocating resources to go to Israel around the Gaza crisis and Ukraine, the authorities in the US said that there was a lot of misinformation and disinformation from Russia, to the extent that some congressmen said they're not going to vote. So we need to ask ourselves that is Africa immune from this kind of disinformation and misinformation, and how it influences our electoral outcomes?
Are you suggesting by any chance that there could be influence from some of these powerful global forces in some of the decisions we make as Africans? Absolutely.
I mean, there's geopolitical competition, and there are people who want to be sure that they've got leaders in Africa who are aligned to their interests. I mean, for instance, when you look at soft power, there are countries which offer scholarships. Like, for instance, Russia offers a number of Kenyan scholarships. So the first thing they do when they land in Russia is to study their local language. When you study the local language, then now you go and do your program, whether it's engineering, medicine, or law. When you come back to Kenya, the probability of dancing to the Kremlin music is extremely high. If you go and study in the UK, in the US, you are still proud of your education. But the question we need to be asking ourselves is that these people who are beneficiaries of scholarships, let's say if it's Russia, when they come back to Africa, whose interests do they serve? Do they actually spread propaganda? Are they architects of misinformation and disinformation? And some of the impact of misinformation and disinformation is when it influences public opinion. The public opinion can influence how you vote. So you may elect people to all these elective positions, and your mind would have been poisoned by misinformation and disinformation. Okay. So it's important in my view, for African countries especially, to take care of that, because the most powerful economy in the world, US, was affected. UK was affected. The European Union has been affected. So what makes people believe that Kenya cannot be affected by that?
Okay. And coming back to the issue of parties, and yes, we see that probably the ANC is suffering from waning influence, and Dismas Mukua here suggests that even Chama cha Mapinduzi, CCM in Tanzania, could be suffering the same. At the same time, we're looking at Kenya and watching the president and what he's doing with the UDA party. Yes, there are perceived cracks, but just this week, the acting Secretary General, and I've heard him being referred to as acting now, the Secretary General of the UDA party was in China to benchmark with the Communist Party, meaning that we cannot ignore, as he says, the kind of influence that comes from outside of Africa. But do you think that in the Kenyan context, that kind of input from a communism party could actually be beneficial to a party in our context?
Thank you. My good friend here touched on a very fundamental thing, that is influence by other powers that's be in Africa. I'm sure in Africa we can say we are independent somehow, but we are never free. Mm-hmm. That one, we 100% agree to it. That everything we do, not only elections, but any other thing Africa does, let me bring it to even Kenya, anything we do has a bearing from other powers. Party that is in Kenya, maybe the ruling party, we can still read from history that, as he said, okay, KANU was at one point the biggest party. That, yeah, the way it ended is very much normal. That, okay, my friend here is today with me in this party. He feels he's not comfortable, go and forms other party. Mm-hmm. That one, he has taken one bigger strength of me. That party keeps on dying slowly. Like ANC, I will still repeat that at one point, ANC was known very much that, okay, it can get in, maybe even unopposed. As much as DA can try, as much as maybe EFF from 2014 can try their best, but at one point we can fully say, no, that party is fully strong. Mm-hmm. But with the way parties are now forming, the way people, the way youthful generation are understanding politics and coming in, like that of Malema, things are changing. And that party will at one point... Are they being influenced by powers from outside Africa, these younger leaders, the likes of Jacob Zuma? Definitely, their influence. The influence is that Africa these days are speaking different voices, mm-hmm. that they are growing, they want to be free. That is why we talk of Pan-Africanism, I don't know, BRICS, I don't know, having their own currency, I don't know, doing 1, 2, 3, even though some of African presidents are, let me not call puppets, but close to. Mm-hmm. Because during the day they speak Pan-Africanism, and then when they go outside, I don't know if people feel like they're Americans, or I don't know, they're Germans. Mm-hmm. Because what they do outside there and what they bring here are two different stories. Mm-hmm. If we look at our president, let me a bit speculate, sorry. If we look at our president, when he speaks to other African colleagues, I'm sure everybody is too much comfortable looking at him and saying, okay, this man looks like he's from heaven. Mm-hmm. He loves Africa so much. But the funny thing is, we even agreed to LGBTQ. Have we? No, we yes. Haven't. No, we haven't. I'm sure we did from the court. The president himself, I haven't seen him. Are you quoting the Supreme Court? The Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. If I say we agreed, because I'm sure Supreme Court cannot just talk up and agree to things, as much as they use the law plus... Would it be fair to lay that on the president, really? 100%. If you ask me why, before that issue came to be, I'm sure we have seen speculations around... It is a debate that we have. But
are you talking about the President of the Supreme Court or the President of the Republic of Kenya?
The President of the Republic of Kenya. Uh-huh. At one point, let me not delve into that. You asked me if these parties are getting influence from outside. That one, we are sure that it's influenced from, it's much influenced. Because if you look at their manifesto, what they want to do, fine, we can say this is Kenyan thing. But how the very same manifestos are to be implemented, we definitely lean on the other side. Fine, we can lean on for help from maybe other things, but not bringing their agendas that are hurtful to the people. And you're very much sure this is not in any way adding to positive growth.
Okay.
Yeah, let me just stress a point here as indicated, still on South Africa. Because at the lower levels of government, they've actually had coalitions. And according to South African media, those coalitions have been nothing but a disaster. Because the various party leaders have just been fighting, the various elected members have been fighting every single day, which is the reason why Ramaphosa, when he's going to pick a coalition partner, they must pick up a bulletproof system.
Is that even possible?
It's possible because now he has to, if he doesn't do that, then South Africa may degenerate to become a normal third world country. Because now with about 43%, all the other parties may decide to coalesce and in fact kick out ANC. If all those other parties over the weekend while we are doing our Madaraka Day, they decide to have a cup of coffee, all of them, apart from ANC, they will form a government. But before the elections, all of them indicated, no, we've come up with a multi-party charter. One party says we can't do business with this other one, we can't do business with another one. But you know, the smell of power, the taste of that power can easily make them come together. So there's a probability that in the next few days when they declare the official results, Ramaphosa may not, rather ANC, may not be the ruling party in South Africa. If all those parties, I think there are about 50, if they decide to coalesce, although the probability is very low. Because when now they go to the table, they'll start asking themselves, among us, who is going to become the president? One party has got 1%, another one has got 0.1%, another one has got 11%.
Of course, the party with a bigger percentage will lay claim to that. In this case, ANC, if it forms a coalition.
No, assuming they're having conversations without ANC.
Without ANC.
So now there is DA, which seems to be doing very well. And then there's the one for Zuma. Zuma himself, the constitutional court barred him from running to become a member of their National Assembly or Parliament. And then you cannot become a president in South Africa if you're not an elected member. So it brings two questions. So if they're not very careful, we may need to send mediators, conciliators to go and have conversations.
That is the party they most likely go for, probably, for coalition.
Yeah, and then another question you need to ask whether or not there is a foreign influence in Africa because of disinformation and misinformation. If you go to West Africa, a number of countries have organized coups. And the moment the coups happen, the coup leaders, they kick out the French, they kick out the Americans, and they replace them with Russia. And then they say, now we have made it, they open champagne bottles. But one wonders, you kick out one power, and you replace the one power with another power, and this other power is not aligned to your national and public interest. So what are we really talking about? And my colleague has indicated that these African leaders, some of them are puppets. Now you are a puppet if you are not driving your nation's public interest, if you are not driving your nation's national interest. But if you are driving your nation's national interest and public interest, and the morale is happy, then you cannot be described as a puppet.
Susan, as far as your assessment of political parties in Africa and the strength, ANC is one of those parties that anyone would look up to. 30 years in power, great shift in the political outlook of that nation. Now we see after 30 years, everything is changing, and the destruction appears to be coming from within. The biggest challenges are people who were at the forefront in championing ANC's moves. At that time, and you look at the Kenyan situation, and the president is trying to create one monolithic political party. Do you think it's even possible to pursue that kind of route?
No, it's not possible. Just the other day, and we saw, like, for instance, here in Kenya, we saw what Itumbi wrote, and we are having the age, or rather the old versus the young coming in. So there is some uneasiness in Africa where I don't think we can go back to those eras of one party. And
you seem to suggest that the issue is generational difference, the young versus the old.
Yes, because also even Julius Malema, whenever he's talking, he trashes old people. He can't say, he says, you cannot tell us about the future which you will not be there. So I don't think it's possible
Yes, yet we've seen Chama cha Mapinduzi survive all these years. And one may wonder, okay, fine, you expect and you say, oh, it's also losing influence, but, well, are they really losing influence?
Yeah, we are coming there.
Yeah, actually, one of the things that Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, one of the founders of Chama cha Mapinduzi, indicated that in Tanzania, they'll make Chama cha Mapinduzi to be so strong that if there's going to be opposition in Tanzania, it will be opposition within Chama cha Mapinduzi. Even at some stage when people were coming up with the divergent positions, the ordinary Tanzanian would tell you, join Chama cha Mapinduzi and bring your issues within Chama cha Mapinduzi.
Ndani ya chama.
Yeah, ndani ya chama. Huo mjadala tuangalie tukiwa ndani ya chama. But if you're outside, you come up with Chadema and other political parties, then people will look at you, they say, we mungwana, we sio mzalendo. So I think there is that issue. And then talking about generational change in the Kenyan leadership, that one is one of those paradoxes that Wanjiku will need to give me quick classes. Because how old is President Ruto? How old is Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua? So when you're talking about generational change in leadership, these leaders are in their 50s and 60s. It's not like in the US where you have Trump and Biden in their, 80s, late 70s. All the leaders in Kenya are very young. So when you talk about a generational change, what exactly are you talking about? And also there's evidence to suggest that a capacity to deliver as a leader is not a factor of your birthday. It's about your capacity to understand issues. For instance, in Kenya, some of the most celebrated leaders include the late Tom Mboya. Tom Mboya came up with fundamental political philosophies and economic philosophies when he was in his late 20s. But we know people who are in their late 90s or even late 80s who want positions of leadership, but they cannot even speak English or Swahili. Sorry, because language is not a measure of intelligence, but they cannot understand challenges in any economy, and they cannot offer solutions. So in my view, anybody who wants political leadership in Kenya, if you are only selling proposition is your birthday, probability of getting it wrong is almost 100%. What you must demonstrate is that you have capacity and competence to lead the nation. Okay. Because we've seen, like for instance, some of the young people who organized coups in Western Africa, they say we want to liberate the nation. So they organize a coup, they sit at the presidential palace, wherever it is they sit. Then after 2 years, they say, we are now going to organize a free and fair election. But this free and fair election is going to take place after 5 years. It's going to take place after 10 years. So what are you telling people? Because you said you're going to the office because there is no democracy. But as soon as you socialize with power, then you realize, wait a minute, through issuing a presidential decree, it can be here for another 10 years, and it can be here for maybe even another 15 years. So in my view, anybody aspiring for political leadership, if you're going to stick on your birthday, then probability of getting it wrong is 100%. In
Kenya, we also have a debate about generational change in politics, younger leaders taking over, and we've seen it even happening in Mount Kenya region, that the younger members of the National Assembly feeling that they can take charge. But if we could compare with what's happening in South Africa and what the assessment that Dismas has said, and even Susan, age doesn't really give you an edge over any other person. EFF, everyone expected that kind of, they filled a stadium and they used a lift to elevate their leader, and one thought that mass of red was enough to change everything. It did not.
Yeah, I think my brother touched on something very important, as well as my sister. That was a generational change. I think in Kenya, we are still different from other parts of the country. My brother said most of our leaders are in their 50s and 60s. How old is Rigiji? How old is the president? But let's look at the real issue here. How long have they been in politics? And how many new or young people are coming up, taking the top position? I'm sure in Kenya it's not that easy that a young, maybe person from, let's say, Madeira or even any other part of this republic, as young as you are in politics, or even fresh from nowhere, can come up like Malema, have your own party, run it strongly, and be recognized. It's not easy in Kenya. If we look at the recent statement by our deputy president, when some of Muranga leaders talked of maybe Ndindi Nyoro as the next, what was his reaction? I'm sure he was just looking at, saying, these are just young people joking around. They don't need this thing. This is not even their tech. That means in Kenya, for you to be maybe at the top, you must be of a certain age. That is their thinking. Not everybody's thinking, but those at the helm of leadership, the highest part, are thinking, okay, unless you are 50 and above, how comes? How do you even talk of being? For instance, in my area, I come from Mandera, we have been seeing close to 10 individuals in politics for the last, I'm currently 28, and I've been seeing them since my birth.
They never change.
To death. It's not easy. It's not possible. And I'm sure it's not only in that region. In the rest of the regions, if you look at them from maybe 2007 to date, just assess the rest of the regions also. You can see Baba and his crew are almost the same. If may change, maybe some few MCS, some few MPs who are young coming up. But does it mean they don't aspire to be president? They don't maybe have capability to be the deputy president? No. But it's that the leaders, look at party leadership. Which party has maybe a person of 30, 40 years as party chairperson or as party leader? We have so many. We have so many parties.
Cleophas Malala is relatively young. I think still in his 30s or maybe.
Fred, the argument was,
just a bit. Let me conclude kindly.
Yes. Okay.
From your point of
30 seconds.
Sorry, Cleophas Malala. He came and offered a statement. Then what next? He was termed as acting. He's just a child, an MCA, elevated MCA. That is thinking of those who feel like they are more than 50.
Okay.
Do you think he can make anywhere?
Okay. Because of time, I think now you'll have to make your final remarks on this issue of party and the general elections in South Africa, as well as you make your final comment.
I think the issue here is the conversation is going on. And like I've said, Dennis Itumbi wrote something on Facebook. And it was to trash the deputy president that you guys, you are there to mentor us to come into leadership. So the conversation is going on, and the truth of the matter is we'll never have one party. That we'll be having small young people like Malema coming up and trying to set an agenda for young people until the day. You see the problem...
Until he gets of age. Yeah.
That's the point.
Yeah. So the problem with young people, I told you I was in ballot in 2022. They will come out, promise you things, tell you how we are taking over. It's time for young people, but they never go to vote. You go talk to an older person, they tell you, you've convinced me, I'll give you my vote. So I think as much as we are talking about it and everything, we should ask ourselves, the young people, are we ready to take over? Most of the time we are told power is not, it's taken, it's not given. And I think that's where we are headed.
Okay.
Yeah.
But dismiss.
In my view, if you want to assume any position of leadership, especially elective office, don't use your birthday as a selling proposition. Just demonstrate capacity that you understand the problems. But your birthday won't matter. And you're going to be dismissed because of your birthday. You'll be dismissed because of your birthday if, when you've been given 1 hour to address 1,000 voters, the only thing you're telling them is when you were born, how you were born, which hospital you were born, the number of accounts you have on social media, the number of parties you've attended. That's why you'll be likely to get 1 vote. But if you demonstrate competence and capacity, you'll get that position. You can use our Kenyan examples. You can start by Tom Mboya. How old was Tom Mboya when he became an MP? Look at Mwai Kibaki, look at Dr. Z. Tionyonka. All of them were young guys who demonstrated capacity and leadership. You can go to a global level. How old was Barack Obama when he became president? How old was Tony Blair when he became president? Even in some Nordic countries, I think there's a country they elected a female prime minister. I think she was at the age of 32. So it's not an issue of birthday. No, it's an issue of capacity and competence. Because you see, for instance, I come from Mososho. If you come and tell people in Mososho that I elect me because it says it's 28, because I'm 28 years old, and the issue is coffee and tea, you're not telling them how you're going to increase the tea and coffee prices, but elect me because I'm 28, they'll tell you both to pamoja. But on the material day, you'll discover that even your brother and your spouse has not voted for you. In fact, you may end up getting negative votes. You will discover that, the way they say in Coast, Kitakuramba. And then number two, when speaking about misinformation and disinformation, the Kenyan youth, they need to be alive to those vagaries, because the moment you consume misinformation and disinformation, you can easily be a victim of these foreign powers that can easily compromise your thinking.
What is this misinformation and disinformation that you keep talking about? Is it the influence? Is it manipulation? What exactly is it?
You hit the nail on the head. It's manipulation. That when a foreign power wants you to think in a particular manner, like for instance, when you're talking about the Ukraine and Russian war, Russia has come up with the disinformation campaigns justifying everything they're doing in Ukraine. When you talk about the Middle East, Israel and the Palestinians, all of them are competing with disinformation campaigns. Even at some stage, experts from the Middle East indicated it's no longer the war of bullets. It's about your disinformation campaigns. Because, people accuse Gaza when they say that a certain number of people have been killed. They keep on stressing women and children. There's always a disclaimer. So, when you're back at home, everything which comes to your mind, you say, it's children and women. When the Israelis are talking about, they ask their statements, they say, what happened on October 7th? Some people were having a party somewhere, they were picked, women were raped, children were butchered. So when you become a victim of this, then it means you cannot sit back and have an objective view. And the way they do it is, for instance, on social media, they'll come up with accounts which look like they're coming from a credible organization. Like, for instance, somebody can come up with accounts similar to TV47. So if you're not well-schooled, you may actually think that this information coming from TV47, when in fact it's not.
Okay, Asante, finally.
Finally,
you have about a minute
to continue from where my brother stopped.
About the birthday.
Yeah, about the birthday. You said, okay, for you to win any elective seat, just go sell your idea to the people, regardless of your age. But let's be honest about it. How many people can listen to you, looking at you while they know, there are some factors which I'm sure Kenyan will consider. Number one, what's your account? How heavy is it speaking? Number two, who are you? Like, were you seen in this political field for some time? Were you seen with Raila? Were you seen with Uhuru? Were you seen with 1, 2, 3 individuals? And then there are some other factors when it comes to now different regions. From my area, they are what you call negotiated democracy, where elders will just sit and say, okay, those elders, number one, some few understand youth and what their needs are. They'll just say, okay, we'll pick this alderman simply because he has been there or he has been trying for some time. Okay. I'm sure that one also is not only in that region, but if you see even Mount Kenya region, everybody's trying, okay, let's go to the Murutri, then Wazee or to Blaze. Somebody is crowned to
time is up.
Just give me 30
unfortunately,
seconds.
I wanted him to make his final comment because unfortunately we are out of time.
I wanted just to say that there are people from where he comes from, Northeastern Province, who have gone against negotiated democracy and they've won.
Okay. Final comment.
On the same.
You're actually making your very last sentence before you interrupted.
Okay. My final comment on South Africa is that we wish them best, that they will get who they wanted and exactly who will bring changes that South Africa needs. And South Africa plays a very important role in this region. And we hope it goes as Africans.
Yeah, right. Yes, the changing face of African politics, drawing from what's happening in South Africa with the elections. ANC still in the lead, 42.34%, followed by the Democratic Alliance at 23%. Umkhonto Wesizwe, 10%, and finally EFF, not finally, EFF coming a distant fourth. There are other, I think from number 3, you just say others. And well, thank you so much, Hafi.